Do you know someone obsessed with religion? Trigger warning. Viewer discretion advised. Nothing said here should be interpreted as a criticism or negative judgment of religion. This is the second half of the very religious chapter, from Is Your Loved One Mental? 50 Things to Look For, available on Amazon. In this book, you learn how to spot serious mental illness, and in so doing, will less likely be a victim of senseless violence, and will be better prepared to help the mentally ill. A great many schizophrenic people have told me that they hear God speaking to them. This is an example of an auditory hallucination, a common symptom of schizophrenia. Often, the mentally ill person will not tell anyone about their psychotic experiences, partly because they may believe that there is something uniquely special about their relationship with God, and fear that they will taint it or diminish it by talking to others about it. This is especially true when this cherished experience of theirs is then explained as the product of their mentally ill mind. Mentally ill people quickly learn what to tell others and what to keep to themselves. In a way, this is unfortunate, because the schizophrenic person cannot be so readily understood, and thus helped, when they are guarded about their psychotic symptoms. More often than not, the voices heard by disturbed people sound bad or malevolent. Evil-sounding, threatening voices often instruct them to do something wicked, such as to harm or kill others, sometimes, even their loved ones. A devilish voice may tell them that they will burn in hell for all eternity, if they do not do as they are instructed. Pretty scary stuff, and to the mentally ill person, it seems for all the world very real. In an effort to appease, and hopefully reduce, the taunting voices, the schizophrenic may engage in behavior that appears self-destructive, and reflective of very poor judgment. Many will turn to street drugs or alcohol to numb themselves, so that they are less emotionally distressed by the upsetting voices they hear, and other psychotic manifestations they experience. Some people with schizophrenia will even choose to commit suicide, to end the torment caused by incessant, threatening, and often denigrating, auditory hallucinations. Rather than succumb to command hallucinations telling them to kill their spouse, mother, father, children, and others, some will choose instead to harm themselves. The mentally ill who refuse to give in to command hallucinations to do wrong, sometimes do so at the cost of their own lives. Hallucinations, especially auditory hallucinations, often motivate schizophrenic people to become hyperreligious. The man who hears the devil telling him that he is damned to hell or that his soul is Satan's to keep. Or the woman who hears and feels the breath of Satan upon her, as he endeavors to have sexual relations with her, often, and quite understandably, turns to religion for protection. Many turn to prayer, with a desire, for example, to be a good Christian, and thus, a less tempting target for the devil. In so doing, they mean to communicate to the devil that they are godly, and have the Lord's protection. This is somewhat analogous to the bullied child befriending the bigger kid on the school playground for protection. Many a schizophrenic person I have worked with will exclaim, "Get thee behind me, Satan," when they hear, see, or feel the devil's presence. They want it to be known that they are Christian, indeed, a good Christian. Their fear of the devil, born of frightening and threatening psychotic symptoms, leads them to embrace religion. While schizophrenic people are usually drawn to more fundamentalist denominations, some will stay with the religious denomination in which they were raised. The appeal of conservative fundamentalist denominations is that in these churches and communities, there may be a greater tolerance of what might elsewhere be correctly understood as bizarre behavior, demonstrative of serious mental illness. So, if the schizophrenic person begins to act peculiarly at church, the parishioners may join in with singing and chanting, and view the mentally ill person as being able to speak in tongues, communicate with spirits, or, perhaps, as being demon-possessed, and in need of an exorcism. Progressive religious denomination churches may instead view the bizarre antics of the mentally ill person as troubling and inappropriate, and the schizophrenic parishioner may be asked not to return. Some fundamentalist Christian sects endorse speaking in tongues, demon possession, communication with spirits, and such, and this would suit just fine the schizophrenic church member. As an aside, one could speculate that these beliefs were spawned long ago by a charismatic schizophrenic religious leader. The mentally ill sometimes develop their own peculiar, idiosyncratic speech, a product of their thought disorder, a hallmark symptom of schizophrenia. Uninformed others may instead view this as speaking in tongues, and the schizophrenic would no doubt welcome a non-pathological explanation. So, within some church communities, the symptoms of schizophrenia may be viewed as godly or divinely inspired, or, conversely, devil-inspired, rather than being seen more correctly as the product of a psychotic mind. A schizophrenic person might well be drawn to a church that normalizes, rather than pathologizes, their psychotic experiences. Nobody wants to be considered, quotes, crazy. If the mentally ill can be free to be themselves, without fear of ridicule or being labeled crazy, they will feel very welcomed indeed. Frightening hallucinations having an evil element may motivate the disturbed person to pray abundantly. Obsessive praying can be understood as a byproduct of the considerable distress caused by the person's psychotic symptoms. Their psychotic experiences, which they perceive as very real, have made a believer of them. They hear a frightening voice, believe it to be the voice of a demon or the devil, and become religious zealots. These people will likely pray multiple times a day, perhaps own several Bibles, and may always carry a Bible with them. Indeed, many schizophrenic people I have evaluated brought a Bible to the examination office. Metaphorically, as they go about the schoolyard of life, they will stay ever close to their big, protective friend, to avoid being bullied by others in the schoolyard. They may accomplish this by attending church regularly, or praying frequently, and incorporating their zealous religious beliefs into the fabric of their life. The sense of protection and security that the schizophrenic person feels through prayer and other religious activities is an important source of motivation toward religion. Another important factor, though less obvious, is the role of religion in giving structure to one's life. In addition to the Ten Commandments, there is much in the Bible and other religious texts that speak to how the righteous life should be lived. From religious texts, edicts have been developed about living the godly life, that are clear and concrete, and this standard of conduct is communicated to the parishioners. Schizophrenics often seek structure in their lives. They have unreal, psychotic experiences that leave them feeling as though their feet are not planted firmly on the ground. This feeling is understandable, considering their fleeting and tenuous grasp of reality. Depending upon the severity of psychotic symptoms at any one time, the mentally ill person is to varying degrees in touch with, or out of touch with, reality. Like someone wanting a line drawn in the sand to know what is acceptable behavior and what is prohibited, the troubled person is looking for as much external structure as possible. Essentially, they seek anchoring. By adding structure to their lives, they feel they have greater self-control, and hope to reduce the chaotic thinking that goes on in their minds. The schizophrenic's thoughts are often disordered and confused, so the structure that religious faith and its edicts offers is desirable. When they hear a voice telling them to do something they know to be wrong, they will turn to the edicts of their church and religious texts for help in resisting command hallucinations. Many times, it is not just command hallucinations that motivate the mentally ill person to do wrong, but also their impulses. Due to strong sexual impulses, many schizophrenics become hypersexual, while others may endeavor to thwart this impulse by insisting on celibacy. Frequently, there is also much sexual orientation confusion. This is particularly true among adolescent schizophrenics, a great many of whom report that they are bisexual, or bi-curious, and are not at all clear about their sexuality beyond that. I recall a schizophrenic man who described himself as, quotes, trisexual, by which he meant that he had sexual relations with men, women, and animals. Schizophrenics with sexual impulses they view as unacceptable may be drawn to a conservative or fundamentalist denomination church that may condemn, for example, sex outside marriage and same-sex sexual activity. In short, impulses deemed unacceptable by the mentally ill person are reined in by a belief system to which they cling dearly, to bolster their resolve not to act out on those impulses. Many a very sexually active schizophrenic female has reported feeling shame for behaving, quotes, like a slut, and turns to religion for help controlling sexual impulses. Not infrequently, I have assessed schizophrenic women who announced that they were celibate and had not had sex in many years. Despite their avoidance of sexual contact, their obsession with sexuality often persisted. A religious 60-year-old woman I assessed declared that she was, quotes, virginal and celibate. Despite her report of having turned her back on sexual activity years earlier, she could not engage in conversation with others without introducing sexual remarks. For example, she would find any reason in conversation to mention her clitoris and report that she was, quotes, tight from limited use. This woman would also pronounce certain body parts in an odd manner, such as pronouncing penis as penis and anus as anus. The sexual impulse is an impulse that many a schizophrenic person endeavors to curb through prayer and a strict, religious lifestyle. The specific religious motivations vary considerably between one disturbed person and another. Sometimes, they struggle with the impulse to harm others, even close relatives. Most schizophrenic people are aware that it is wrong to harm others, and will turn to scripture and their church, in an effort to avoid acting on these impulses. Encouragement of a righteous or godly lifestyle often strengthens their resolve not to act out on wicked impulses. Any impulse imaginable, from an urge to sodomize an animal, to an impulse to shoot up a school, or an impulse to eat feces, has plagued, and is likely plaguing now, some miserable schizophrenic person. Sadly, that is the unfortunate nature of the mental illness. To learn how to spot schizophrenia, I recommend the Mental Things to Look For books, available on Amazon.